Chapter 1. All Roads Go Somewhere. My name's Jake, 59 years old and still waking up before sunrise, though I retired years ago. I live in Peterstown, Pennsylvania, a place where the quiet doesn't just come at night, it settles into the walls, the kind of silence that grows roots. This story goes back to 1994, when I was working the night shift at a freight station in Bedford County. It was one of those junctions where everything passed through. Coal trains, maintenance engines, sometimes freight no one talked about. 8 active platforms, well documented. Then there was the 9th. Nobody logged the 9th. No schedule, no lights. But it was there, just beyond the maintenance zone, past a fence that didn't even have a lock. First time I heard about it, I'd been on the job less than a week. My supervisor, Johnny, 60-something, gray mustache, spoke like he'd seen too much, said it once during a smoke break. "If you ever see a train on 9, he muttered, "don't approach." Chapter 2. The File Without Records. I went back into the main station building. The rain hadn't stopped. It hammered the rooftop like it had a purpose. Inside, the place felt hollow, too quiet for a working night. Dispatch was empty, but the archive door, the one that was always locked after 8 p.m., stood slightly ajar. The hallway light cast a long shadow across the floor, like it was reaching into the room. I stepped closer, slowly. Inside, a row of metal cabinets, a dusty file rack no one used anymore. But on the desk, one folder, gray, faded, with no label, except for a handwritten line, Jake Stevens, Internal Observation. I didn't remember anyone logging that. I picked it up, opened it. Inside was a schedule, dates, times, platforms, covering nearly 20 years of my shifts, all accurate, too accurate, but wedged between the entries were notes I never made. 0809, 1986, train on platform 9. Chapter 3. A platform that breathes. I stepped out into the rain again, file folder still fresh in my mind. The air felt different, thicker somehow. The station, usually dim but still alive with machinery, had gone eerily quiet. Platform 9 remained lit. That same quiet train, still sitting, doors open. I didn't remember walking toward it, but I found myself there, just outside the yellow line. My boots were soaked. I couldn't hear the rain anymore, only the humming. Not from the train, but below me, like the ground was alive, breathing. Inside the car, nothing. No passengers, no seats. Just a long hallway stretching farther than a freight car should allow. The walls pulsed, slow like a heartbeat. I placed one hand against it. Warm. There were no instructions, no conductor, no clocks, but the train felt like it was waiting for me. I stepped in. The floor sank, slightly, like memory foam, but colder. The moment I crossed the threshold, the doorway behind me faded into black. Not closed, gone. The exit wasn't there. Chapter 4. Echo Without Source. I didn't sleep that morning. I didn't even sit. I drove home in silence, made coffee I didn't drink, and left the radio on just to hear something that wasn't memory. But it didn't help. The voices from the train weren't just sounds. They left marks, like someone had written notes inside my head. Later that day, I returned to the station. I told no one. Platform 9 looked the same. Empty, quiet, irrelevant. The kind of quiet that only mattered if you'd seen it move. I stood near the dispatch booth and turned on the monitor system, though it rarely showed anything useful. Just static. But that night, the static changed. Not into images, into rhythm. It pulsed. 3, slow, then 1 sharp, then silence. Again, 3, slow, 1 sharp. It wasn't a fault, it was a pattern. And beneath the pattern, faint audio. Not loud enough to make out the words, but just enough to realize they were words. So I recorded it, played it back.
The next night, I brought the folder home. I shouldn't have, but I did. Laid it out on the table. No coffee, no TV, just quiet. I wanted to study the handwriting again. My own, but written like it was watching me. Page after page of schedules and sightings. But this time, I noticed something tucked between 2 entries. A photo. Old, blurred, taken under harsh station lighting. It showed a man, tall, in a gray coat, standing near Platform 9. His face was turned from the camera, but what struck me wasn't his posture. It was his boots. They were mine. Not similar, mine. That was 1986, and I had no memory of being photographed, no memory of standing on Platform 9 that night. But as I held the photo closer, something in my head shifted. Not a memory, but a feeling, like something had waited to be noticed. I went outside, to the shed behind my house. It held boxes I hadn't touched in decades. High school records, old pay stubs. Chapter 6. Dispatch never logged this. I didn't sleep that morning, didn't even sit. I drove home in silence, made coffee I didn't drink, and left the radio on, hoping to drown out whatever had followed me back. But it stayed. In the walls, in the wiring, in the feeling that Platform 9 was no longer a place. It was a pulse. That night, I returned to the station. Not by logic, not out of duty. Something pulled me. Call it habit. Call it gravity. The dispatch booth was untouched, monitors idle, but the analog device I'd taken home, the one labeled Return Only from 9, was back, sitting quietly on the desk where I hadn't left it. I didn't touch it, just stared. Then it powered on, by itself. A soft green dial glowed, humming faintly. Static filled the booth's speakers, but it wasn't random. It pulsed in rhythm. 3 slow clicks. 1 sharp. Silence. Again. Underneath,
Chapter 7. Platform 9 is always lit. The man who looked like me didn't speak. He simply watched me from the edge of the porch, eyes calm, posture still. Same build, same clothes, but he stood like he'd been waiting longer than I'd lived. Outside, the street was silent. No headlights, no wind. Just him. And behind him, something impossible. Rails. Twisted, rusted, glowing faintly from beneath the asphalt. Platform 9 had arrived. Not beside the station, not in memory. Right here, in front
of my home. He turned and walked toward it. Each step echoed, not on pavement, but on steel. Sound moved differently, as if carried through bone instead of air. I felt each footfall in my ribs. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The moment he stepped... Chapter 8. The Man Who Was Me. That night, Jake didn't sleep. Not because of fear. That part had already passed. What kept him awake was the growing sense that something was riding him. Not watching, not haunting, but composing him version by version. The analog device now hummed with layered voices, not overlapping, arranged, like a choir of lives. When Jake touched it, the house changed. Not visibly, spatially. Rooms felt wider, longer. The hallway took 2 more steps than before. Time between clocks stretched. And in the bathroom mirror, Jake saw something impossible. Himself, but clean-shaven, younger, wearing an old freight vest, the one he hadn't worn since 1991. This Jake stared back, calm, almost disappointed. Jake didn't speak. He knew this wasn't a trick of memory. It was a reveal. He turned from the mirror. Every window in the house showed different landscapes, nighttime deserts, snowy tracks. Chapter 9. Memory is not yours alone. Jake had always assumed his mind was his own, his recollections, his errors, his silence. But Platform 9 had other plans. The analog device on his desk changed overnight. Not visibly, structurally. Its dial now pulsed with unfamiliar rhythm. When he touched it, he didn't hear sound. He heard record-keeping. Names, locations, dates. Events he had never experienced, but that were somehow logged under his initials. Platform 9 wasn't haunting his past. It was aggregating his future. Jake found new folders in his filing cabinet, ones that didn't exist before, stamped with rail codes from stations across the state. Every sheet chronicled decisions he never made, yet they were recorded in his handwriting. Chapter X. The Loop That Cannot Be Closed. Jake had a plan. He was done being watched, remembered, rewritten. The analog device, the folders, the mirrors, they were pieces of someone else's idea of him. So he acted. Burned every paper, smashed the device, covered every reflective surface, pulled the fuse to black out the house. For a moment, it worked. The silence was real, not heavy, just calm. But Platform 9 had never needed light. That night, Jake dreamed in grids, not images, blueprints, track layouts, service codes, weather stations. He saw versions of stations that had never been built, dispatch systems with unfamiliar languages, timestamps for dates that hadn't arrived. And one phrase repeated over and over in his sleep. Loop confirms. Identity persists. He woke choking on something invisible. Not smoke, not... Chapter 11. The Exit Is Not Where You Began. Jake no longer tried to escape the 9. He understood now. It wasn't a place. Not a haunting, not a machine. It was memory reshaped into repetition. Identity looped until belief blurred. Platform 9 had written him, overwritten him, again and again. But tonight, something changed. He walked out into the backyard, where soil had once held tomatoes and rusted tools. Now, rails. Tracks he didn't remember laying, rusted, quiet, sloping west. He followed them. No flashlight, no fear, just motion. At the end stood a forgotten bench, wooden, carved with initials too weathered to read. To everyone who walked this track with us, thank you. You stayed through the silence, through the static, through the shadows that weren't always kind. Station 9 wasn't just Jake's story. It was a mirror, maybe to a moment you felt haunted by, or to a